There we go. All right. Okay, welcome everybody to the January 19th Cloud Events Serverless Working Group call. Let's see, we have, why can't I see my screen? That's really weird. Here we go. Okay. Let's see, 8 people. All right. Haven't heard anything new relative to the cloud events in London, or I'm sorry, the KubeCon in London. I think Manuel and Clemens just have it on their plate to get ready for that. Nothing worth mentioning, I think. I have not heard from anybody relative to these 3 KubeCons. And just a reminder, the first deadline is February 2nd to submit a CFP. So if you or you know somebody who's interested, please let us know. Otherwise, we will skip it this time around. Okay. And I think that's it in terms of announcements. Anybody have anything else they want to bring up or anything else they want to bring up before we jump into PRs and stuff? All right, cool. In that
I still
case,
had a couple of questions saved up from last time, but I can leave those at the end as well perfectly.
Yeah, I apologize for running out of time last
No,
week. I
please
think we will
don't.
have time. Yeah, I think we will have time because at least my PR is not too bad. So
Cool. Okay.
yeah, yep. Actually, hold on. Just to remind myself. Okay, cool. All right, first off, so what was the guy's name? Rob, I believe was his name. He wanted to add an append or per Jem's suggestion to get some pointers to existing data protection and privacy regulation documents. He had a whole table here of all the ones that he stole from this United Nations org. And then I think Clemens suggested last week, well, let's not put the actual table in there. Let's just put links to it with possibly some examples. So here are some examples. Here are some links to the document itself. And let me show you what it looks like. So here. So I gave a link to the web page. Tell people where they can download it using the download full data button and a direct link to that to what that button has behind it. And then, as I said, just some examples. Just randomly picked it. I just picked them out of thin air from the list. Okay. Any thoughts on this? Okay. Any concerns or objections to approving it then? Cool. Thank y'all.
I give it a thumbs up. So.
Oh, good. Thank you. I didn't notice that. Cool. All right. X registry changes. Okay. Aside from just general typos and wording things that I noticed in the spec, there was a compatibility attribute that was actually duplicated by mistake. I think we ended up moving it between spots and I missed a spot to remove it. So that was just more of a typo more than anything else. We decided to replace the export query parameter with the compact query parameter because we actually wanted slightly different semantics between the export API and the query parameter. So rather than running the risk of causing confusion, we decided to rename the query parameter to be compact. And rather than having it turn on inlining, rather we just said, nope, you can turn on compact. And then if you want inlining, go ahead and turn that on yourself rather than having us default to some subset of the inlining stuff, because turning off inlining once it's been turned on is actually kind of difficult at times. So we decided, well, since you are on a server that supports query parameters, you can specify how much inlining you want, including inline equals star to get everything. Okay. So that was one of the reasons we split that out. Compact by itself is actually an interesting feature, even without doing inlining and stuff. I find it really handy in some of my test cases. So it's actually a good change aside from just the difference in semantics. So as I said, we replaced question mark import with question mark compact. We defined the export API to be then compact turned on and inlining of these 3 things. Now, the reason we did this, just to refresh your memory, the reason we did this default inlining is because the biggest reason we actually created this API at all is because we wanted to support what we call no-code servers. So that's an X registry that's backed by something like S3, where the owner of it doesn't have access to write code for S3, right? It's just basically, here are your files, and S3 serves them up for you. And because you can't support query parameters, and we wanted people to be able to download the entire registry in one shot, as opposed to a whole bunch of individual gets, we decided, well, let's create an API for export, where under the covers in the S3 world is just one gigantic document. And inside that document, show inlining of everything, including the capabilities and the model. So it's a complete export, as well as compact mode. Okay, so that's how we came up with those defaults, in case you're wondering. But technically, obviously, /export is an exact alias for this actual command. But if you don't support query parameters, you can't get there. So that's why we did it. Any questions about that before I move on? All right. We decided to remove the nesting flag. To refresh your memory, if you did a write operation and you included children within that put request, without the nested flag, we would throw an error saying, hey, are you really sure you meant to update all the children as well, not just the parent? And this was our way of like doing equivalent to the -- force flag on the command line. We decided most REST APIs, or at least we couldn't think of a REST API that does that kind of thing. And it actually gets kind of annoying having to remember to do question mark nested every single time when you want to do children. So we decided just to make life simpler, make it less complex, and just said, screw it. We're just going to remove this flag. If you don't want to process the children, leave them out of your request, like every other REST API. Okay. Any thoughts about that one? I know because we had some discussions on that on this call before about that. I want to make sure no one has any objection or concerns with that one. Okay. We changed the character valid character set for ID. We added the @ sign, and we made sure that it has to start with alphanumeric or underscore. I believe before it was basically this entire thing with any character leading. We decided to make it a little bit more normal and keep it just these. Now, keep in mind, typically IDs will probably not show up as attribute names or class names, but in case they do, we decided it's not a big deal for people to convert these characters to underscores or something else. But we don't anticipate that happening very often, or people using these characters in a weird name, like that ends up being a class name. And the limit is 128 characters. So it's this plus 0 or more, 0 or 127 of these guys. So as I said, maximum 128 for character length. We renamed the $ structure, which used to be $meta, to be $details. Unless you are deep in the world of cloud events where structured means something, we decided no one's going to know what structured actually means. Now, details isn't necessarily the best choice, but we decided it's at least better than structure, because this at least gets closer to say, oh, I'm going to find out more information or quote the details of the resource I'm interested in, as opposed to just the document itself. So we think it's a step in the right direction. We're not convinced it's necessarily the best, so we're still looking for suggestions, but we decided it's better than structure. So we decided to change that everywhere. That was just a global search and replace, no semantic change, obviously. Okay, any questions or comments about these guys? Okay, any objection to approving?
I raised a couple of comments that I
Today?
suspect you'll be able to, yes, like half an hour ago, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay.
My just-in-time PR reviewing. I think, why don't you have a look now and ask if you need any more information, but I think they should be self-explanatory, either typos or just...
Okay, a typo.
So
Yeah, that's fine. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yep, I agree. Yep, cool. Thank you. Very minor. Cool. Anybody else? Cool. Approved it. And again, thank you, John. I did miss your review, so I was very sad I didn't see it this morning when I woke up. Okay, cool. Now we had a couple of issues opened up in the cloud events world. I don't necessarily think we have to deep dive into them right here, but I did want to bring them to people's attention so we can maybe look at it next weekend, or I'm sorry, next week. This person basically was just wondering, I think if I understand the question correctly, why we don't allow the trace information from each individual hop when you do the distributed trace extension. I think there was a reason for it. I'm not deep enough in the space to remember. So if you remember, comment on the issue or bring it up next week and we could discuss it, unless someone wants to talk about it right now.
Well, for me, there may be a gap on the cloud events side of things, but I've read quite a few parts over and over again from the OpenTelemetry specification. And one of the things that stands out to me is that I would expect here that these spans would be linked so that there is some way to correlate them together that way. Not necessarily to create sort of child spans everywhere. So because it's message based, right? So the hierarchical relationship is not necessarily expected because these semantic conventions for messaging recommend linking over creating child spans.
Yeah.
They don't
Does
enforce
any
it, but they do recommend it.
Yeah. Does anybody remember why we removed it? I have a guess, but I don't have any idea whether it's right or not. Okay. I'm suspecting, and I really wish Clemens was on the call because I think he may have been one of the people who advocated for this. I suspect we may have done it because in a neural messaging world, you don't care where it goes as long as it gets there. So I think the starting and ending points are all that matters, perhaps. But that's just a wild guess in terms of why we dropped it. But I'll ping Clemens offline and see if he remembers and
Isn't
get him
there
to
this,
comment.
wasn't there
Did-
this
There might be information in some old issues as well.
Yes,
So it might
I
be
was going to
worthwhile
check that.
to look at that.
Yeah. Klaus, were you going to see something in there?
Yeah, so there was this distinction for the events. It's really the end-to-end perspective, and I mean, for this hop by hop, you could still add the tracing context in the protocol-specific way. I think that was this distinction.
Okay.
But yeah, Clemens spoke up about it when we discussed it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Well, like I said, I'll ping him and Mark, it's a good idea. If I find some time, I'll try to look for the old issues around this extension and see if we had any comments in there about why we dropped it. Okay. So anyway, please get a chance to comment on it if you have anything to say. Okay. And then the next one is not quite as simple. Again, this might be for Clemens because I think he's the one that came up with the subscription API spec originally. This guy just had some questions about how difficult it's going to be to create custom filter dialects. In fact, I think he's basically hinting that it may require like an entirely new custom SDK when you do a new dialect. I didn't quite understand it, and I didn't get a chance to read his response back to my comment to him. So if anybody has any spare time or interest in the subscription API, please look this over. And again, I'll ping Clemens on this one as well, because I think you, like I said, started this spec originally. Anybody have any comments on this one? Okay, so if you have any interest, please take a look at this. I'd be interested in some feedback from other folks as well. All right, with that, we're at the end of the formal agenda. Lila, you had some questions or comments.
Yes, a couple. Please bear with me since it's just recently that I'm trying to read through the spec. But one of the things that stood out to me while I was reading through things, let me grab my notes. Here they are. Is that basically there's a way to deprecate an endpoint, right? When you look at the spec for the endpoint. And one of the things that I was wondering is, one of the things that you can do is then say, actually go to this endpoint instead. So there's a way to basically guide users towards the newer endpoint to use. That's somewhere in there. And I found that, yeah, I found that really useful. So I was wondering if the same type of thing has been considered on the message level. So basically, if you, because it says in the spec that if there's a change to the metadata, that consists a new message. So if there would be a change to that message, would there be a way to say, well, this is now sort of the next version of that previous one, so to speak?
Interesting.
To have those dots connected as well.
Yeah, I don't think we've talked about that. Klaus, do you have any thoughts on that one?
I think we talked about it in the very early days of this discovery work, but not recently, I think.
Do you remember why we didn't pursue it?
No, I think that was still before we even started X registry. So when we had this first approach to discovery.
Okay. Okay. Do you have any comments now, or should we just wait till we take it offline? Because we have another meeting tomorrow. We can discuss it.
Yeah, sure.
Any
Take your
thoughts?
time. It's just something that I observed and I was like, oh, I'd like to see that there. So I thought to bring it up.
Okay. Yeah. Oops. Just as a reminder, if you or anybody, I guess, wants to join these offline calls we have them Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. If anybody's interested, including you, Lila, if you want to join, just let me know. I can send you the invite. Um, just if you want to talk about it during our other
Yeah,
phone calls as well.
that'd be
Okay.
nice. I can't promise to make all of them, but yeah, that'd be nice.
Okay. Yeah, just drop me as a private chat if you want in the your email, and I'll send you the invite, and then you can join
Yep.
whenever you want to. Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Yep. Okay, next question. We'll talk about this one tomorrow, but next question that you had.
Well, okay. So when I was first reading through this, and I've read through it a couple of times, and it's like reinforced learning. It takes me a while to build a mental graph, so bear with me. But
Mhm.
my initial assumption was that this would allow a sort of understanding of the consuming endpoints of a specific event. That was how I read it at first. So I was trying to understand like if there was a way to define the consumers of a specific type so that you would have that connected, not even going to the entire like event flow. I know that's out of scope right now, but just like a one-on-one, if that was something that was thought about. I quickly asked Clemens this question and he talked about, no, that would require a client registry. And to be honest, I didn't fully understand what he meant by that with the context that I have. So I thought to bring it up here in the group.
Yeah. Klaus, do you have any comments on that one? While I try
I,
to get to where I want to go.
I didn't fully understand the question. I'm sorry. What is it about?
So basically, would it be possible to understand from a specific message who is consuming that?
From the message
Which
definition as it is in the
right, so
registry, or
right, so now there's an endpoint, and you know which endpoint is possibly publishing that message. But would there be a way to understand the inverse? So who's consuming this message
don't think so.
from the registry?
Depends really on the pattern that is followed there. I mean, if you have a producer or consumer endpoint, but and Clemens said this about the client registry, who because it sounds like
Let me let me
yeah.
bring up his exact words. Give me a second.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I understand why he said it would require client registration because you have no idea who's pulling events from you, right? Because if your endpoint is a consumer endpoint, then people are going to pull messages from that endpoint, and we have no idea who's doing the pulling.
Oh, exactly. And
Right.
that's what I was trying to understand is, would this be an answer to that or not?
I
Or
don't
not
think
Possibly.
now?
so.
Well, I was actually wondering whether people can use the subscriber API because with a subscriber role, I'm sorry, if an endpoint allows subscriptions, it doesn't necessarily force you into a push model, even though that's the most common use case for it, right?
Mhm.
You could say, hey, if you want the endpoint producer to know about all the people that are pulling, ask them all to subscribe, right? With a Kafka or some kind of pulling protocol. That way, at least you get the client subscription, but the server doesn't need to do anything with it other than just maintain a list of who subscribed.
Mhm.
Or Klaus, do you think that violates the intent here of subscribe?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't thought about this. I mean, usually you use those patterns to get this decoupling. Of course, I understand if you run this infrastructure, you still want to have this kind of insight who is actually consuming those
Yeah,
events.
that was my angle is governance,
Yeah.
basically,
Hmm.
right?
I
So you have
understand.
a
Yeah.
very large system, and now I want to change this event that I'm publishing here. Who's affected by this? Or like
Yeah.
having that type of
So I think
insight.
that's not really in scope here, probably because those different infrastructures that are out there all already offer something like this specific to how they do it. But yeah,
Okay.
Maybe
By the way,
Clemens
I have
has a better
Clemens's
answer to
words
this.
before in front of me now. He basically
Okay.
said, a consumer endpoint is the endpoint at a server that a consumer attaches to. It's not the consumer per se. So the existing consumers are not cataloged in endpoints. That may be a client registry that we don't have yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would claim that the subscriber, any subscriber type of API might be the beginning of one of those registries. But I don't think we
Okay.
formally talked about that.
Yeah,
But
I
I
mean,
think the subscription, but doesn't the subscription API talk about how you can do things like Kafka to ask for the queue to get stood up or something like that?
I think it is more for the push style. That's at
Because
least was the intention. I mean,
yeah, that's
you
definitely
could, of course, you could have a Kafka topic that you subscribe to something so that that messages get pushed into the Kafka, I think. But
yeah, because MQTT is push mode or home mode, right?
yeah, well, if you subscribe, but if you, of course, you can take an MQTT topic and subscribe it to something so that you wire things up. But
Yeah.
I guess if you have a broker-based scenario, then usually you get this kind of overview of governance if you manage the broker. You define clients, they get credentials.
Yes,
And
yes, that's in it, but that's not always without pain either. So I was
yeah,
wondering whether this would also sort of provide another way to handle that better. That was basically the thought process was going on in my head.
Yeah. Yeah, but I guess then I agree to Clemens' response. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And then the final question that I had was not something about anything specific, but rather to circle back to the comment that was made on last meeting that you expect the spec to go in an RC by the end of this month, right? If I remember correctly.
Mhm.
And I was wondering, does that refer to the core spec, to all of the specs in this repo, or because there are a couple and they're split. So after I was thinking, does this apply to core spec, the endpoint, the message, all of them? I wanted to validate that.
Yeah, I don't think we ever really made a formal statement. In my mind, every time we talked about it, Klaus, I don't know if you agree. I assumed it was the four main specs: the core one, messaging, endpoint, and schema. The other one, pagination, we haven't even really looked at to know whether it's right or not, and I haven't implemented yet either. So that one probably out of scope for the RC, but I think it was those four specs. Klaus, did you have a different opinion?
I don't know. It might be tough to take all four specs, or for the core spec, I was more optimistic. But let's see. I mean, I could imagine once we call the current status of core an RC that we discover things in the other three, which we still need to work on. I'm not sure if we can really make all four already RC.
Interesting. Okay. We'll talk about that one tomorrow as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. It's obviously at least the core spec. I know Microsoft is working on implementations of the other three. So that's why I suspect Clemens may be thinking it's an RC for all four. But obviously, as a group, we need to talk about it and discuss whether we think the other three have had enough scrutiny, placed on them or not. Because definitely the core spec has, but I don't know about the other ones. So we'll have to see how that goes. But we'll discuss that again tomorrow to see if we can get you a better answer, Mila.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, and then finally, Doug, you basically said that you wanted more eyes on the core one or on all of them. I don't know now. But I was wondering.
Yeah, depending on the answer to that question, it's either one or four. Yeah.
Right. So let's focus on core. Let's take it baby steps, okay?
Yep.
So I was wondering what the best way would be to do that, because of course I can raise a PR with suggestions, but the problem on my end is I still have like doubts and questions, and I'm not sure that a PR would be the best way to do it or the most productive way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Uh, I'll let Klaus give his opinion, but in my opinion, I would love an issue.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, if you want to open a PR, that'd be great. But that requires you to do a whole lot of thinking in terms of where the code change, where the spec changes should go. And if you want to do that, that's great. I would love
Yes,
to help in updating the spec. But
but
as
I'm
a
not there
lower,
yet. That's my
yeah,
issue.
yes, it's a high bar. So, but if you just want to get the concern out there, or even just if you think it's just a silly question, just open an issue.
Okay.
That way we
Yeah.
have it, it's tracked and we can refer back to why we made the decision we did. If even that's too high of a bar, you can also just either join our weekly phone, our 3 days a week phone call, or this phone call like you did now, and bring up questions here. Whatever is the most convenient for you is a you should pursue. Well, I just want to get the information however you want to give it to us.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. That was it.
Okay, cool. All right. And thanks for all the questions and things we'll bring up in tomorrow's call. All right, with that, we are technically done with the agenda. Does anybody have any other topics they'd like to bring up? All right, in that case, we're done. Oh, Lila, were you going to send me your email so I can send you the invite?
Yes, I have an action item for that.
Oh, okay. Okay, I wasn't sure if you were going to send it through the Zoom chat or. Oh no, wait, you got me through Slack, don't you?
That's what I
Okay.
was planning. Yes.
Yep. Okay, that works. That's perfect. Okay, excellent.
Cool.
Okay, great. Last chance. Anybody have any topics they want to bring up? All right, cool. In that case, everybody have a good rest of your week and weekend. Talk next week. Okay. Bye, everybody.